You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
To Test match cricket. The first test of the home summer starts tomorrow. Black Caps against South Africa, Mount Maunganui. Let's get a view from the Republic and bring in cricket correspondent, broadcaster, commentator and journalist with Cricinfo, Firdose Moonda. Firdose, I appreciate you staying up a bit later than you ordinarily might have to chat to us here on News Talk ZB. We are really curious about this team that has arrived in South Africa. It's been called a B, a C, a D team. Just how weakened is this team?
Yeah, incredibly weakened. I mean, we're curious about them too, to be honest, in that not a lot of South Africans will know this team. So really the only players who might have been considered in a first-choice test team are David Bedingham, who's pretty new to the game and has made his debut against India at the end of our home summer. And then perhaps Keegan Peterson, who was dropped twice in the last 2 summers. He also had a horrific hamstring injury, which didn't help him at all. But those are the only 2 really that would come close to a first-choice 11. And I guess that tells you that 13 other members of the 15-player squad are makeshift. Some of them have been recalled from really quite far away. Dane Pitt, for example, answered a Hail Mary call from the coach Shukri Conrad. Dane Pitt lives in the US. He plays in the Major League, and he's come back just to play in this test series. So it's really a hodgepodge. It's a mix of players. But to the credit of Conrad, I think he's done the absolute best he could to put together a fairly credible squad who average 96 first-class caps between them, who have 50 test caps between them, and who I hope will not disgrace South Africa overseas.
So is that the bar then, Firdose, the bar that South Africa don't get thrashed? Would that be a good result? Or might they be competitive in these 2 test matches?
I think they could be. And I'm basing that on a few things. You know, the one is first-class experience. A lot of them have a lot of red ball games to their name, albeit mostly at quite low levels of domestic cricket. And like I mentioned, Dane Pitt's been playing in the US for the last few years. But look, I think South Africans at home who are very preoccupied with the SA20 that is going on concurrently, and then perhaps more so with the national football team who've progressed to the quarterfinals of the African Nations Cup for the first time since the year 2000. I don't think South Africans are really paying a lot of attention to this series. Of course, it also starts in the middle of the night for us, so it's not like people will be watching every ball. But given what West Indies did in Australia, given the way this A team performed against a lot of that self-same West Indies side when they toured here as an A group late last year, I think it's possible that they could cause an upset. I had a look at the New Zealand squad earlier today when I was working on my preview. And of course, all the big guns are there. You know, Kane Williamson, Daryl Mitchell, Tom Latham, an excellent fast bowling attack with Tim Savi, Kyle Jamieson, and our very own Neil Wagner. So, I mean, I think on paper, New Zealand have all the bases covered. They've got a much stronger, more balanced side than South Africa. But I think the one thing that galvanizes South Africans is being told that they can't do something, being told that they're definitely going to lose, and being told that they're underdogs. And so I think this team will just find something in them that New Zealand will have to look out for.
Is there a general understanding among South African cricket fans about what's played out here, or has there been an undercurrent of disappointment about it all?
A little bit of both. I think at the beginning, and especially when the squad was announced and people saw the reality of the players that would be going there, it really hit home that this is a side made up of names that a lot of us don't even know unless you're following the game very closely at a domestic level. And there's obviously still a big debate and a big push and pull between those who want international cricket and particularly test cricket to be the ultimate, and those who can see the reality on the ground. The SA20 was received to huge acclaim last summer, sold out grounds. It was really kind of the signal of the end of the pandemic for us as South Africans. This summer, it hasn't gone quite as well. There's still been a lot of good crowds. I wouldn't say sellout crowds, but good crowds. And there's been a fair amount of good cricket, though not many games have been close. But I think people understand that this is what makes money. And if there's no SA20, there's probably no South African cricket. They probably won't be able to put a test team together. So, you know, we're in a country where the economy is depressed, where people deal with day-to-day hardships like electricity blackouts routinely. And so I think people get that, you know, someone just had to do what they had to do here. And in this case, it was Cricket South Africa, and we've got to live with it.
In that case then, Firdose, is this something we're likely to see repeated?
I think so. I think that as much as they can, Cricket South Africa will try to keep the January to February window, and by that I mean the day after the New Year's tests ends until sort of the middle of February, as free as possible for the SA20. And if you look at the FTP, one big clash that looms in the mind is 2026, which seems a long way away, but really isn't, when England are due to tour South Africa for what will be a money-making 3-test tour. And so that's one clash that I can see in the future. But it's hard to say what the SA20 will look like in 2026. I suspect that, given that it's made money and turned a profit in its first year, it's likely to still do that. Though if you look at the Big Bash and what happened there, I suppose there's a case study in what happens when T20 leagues just lose their mojo. So maybe there's something to be said for that. But I do think that as far as I can see, for the duration of this FTP at least, the SA20 will take precedence because Cricket South Africa really needs it just to keep the money flowing in, just to keep themselves in the black and to run the game at all levels, really.
All right. Well, let's look ahead to this Test series. As you know, having been here a number of times, conditions for Test cricket tend to be seamer-friendly. Seam attacks seem to be the order of the day down here. So will South Africa's bowling attack likely be seam-heavy?
I think so. I don't know that it'll be as good as New Zealand's attack. So you've got Dane Patterson, who's played a couple of test matches in the 2019-20 summer against England and has a lot of experience in England, a lot of experience in South Africa. So, he moves the ball off the seam and he's got over 500 first-class wickets to his name, which is saying something. Then you've got Duan Olivier, and he played some test matches as well for South Africa. But Duan Olivier has never really got his mojo back since he went Kolpak. He was excellent when he first debuted. And since then, he's come back. He had a really bad bout of COVID that kept him out of a series against India. And he just hasn't looked the same. So I'm not too sure about how he'll do. And then South Africa have some young, untested all-rounders like Mihlali Mpongwa. They've also got Chepo Moriki, who's a seam bowler as well. So I guess the seam bowling attack doesn't really have the heft that New Zealand's does. And then the two spinners that have come on tour, Dane Pitt, who I mentioned, who's been in the US, who played test matches some time ago before Keshav Maharaj was picked, and Sean van Berg, who I'm not too sure why he was selected in the squad, to be honest with you, because I think Shukri Conrad just wanted to keep his options open. He's a veteran of the first-class circuit. This is probably his one and only shot at international cricket. And I don't know whether he'll get a game. Neil Brunt, the captain, also bowls a little bit of spin, so perhaps you may see that. But what I can say is in terms of pace, bounce, swing, seam movement, New Zealand certainly have the more dominant attack.
In terms of taking a bit of inspiration, you mentioned Bafana, your football team, into the quarterfinals of the African Cup of Nations for the first time since 2000. They beat 2022 World Cup semi-finalists Morocco to make it through. Then, of course, there was the national women's side who beat Australia in a T20 international for the first time this week. Is there inspiration to be drawn from a couple of the other teams representing South Africa at the moment?
Definitely, absolutely. I think watching the women's side beat Australia, and not really even a year after they reached the final of the T20 Women's World Cup, which was hosted here on home soil, and knowing what it takes for a team that doesn't really have the resources of a team like Australia or England or even India these days to get to that point, served as massive inspiration for everyone in the country. And South Africa have had a really good 14 months of sport. Our national women's football team, Banyana, they became the first senior side to get out of the group stage at a World Cup, and that was at last year's World Cup, which was co-hosted down there in New Zealand and Australia. So you guys will know all about that. And then Bafana, I must admit, we've all watched them for many years and we scratch our heads and wonder what on earth is going on there. But there they are in the quarterfinals. They beat Morocco. Most of us can't believe our eyes, including me. But, they've done it. And if they go any further, I'm not actually sure what will happen in this country. And then, of course, the Springboks, who I know will be a sore point to mention for New Zealanders. But the way that they won the quarterfinal, the semi-final, the final, 1 point wins all of them, the spirit of resilience and the messages they bring across. We often hear Siya Kolisi talking about South Africa as a country with a huge amount of problems, which most of us are facing every day, and how sport and the power of sport really has an ability to say to South Africans, we can compete on a global stage. So I don't think the test team are lacking for inspiration. I think they may be lacking for skill. They may be lacking for experience. But, South Africa have a proud record. New Zealand have never beaten them in a test series in 17 attempts. And I think they'll be very keen to hold on to that.
And the reason you're not here covering the tour is because you're covering the South African side at the Under-19 Cricket World Cup, being hosted, of course, in South Africa at the moment, and the junior Proteas into the semi-finals. How promising is the next wave of male players coming through?
Yeah, they look really good. I must be honest with you, in the lead up to this Under-19 World Cup, the team really flew under the radar. Of course, the tournament was supposed to be held in Sri Lanka, and then it was moved at the last minute to South Africa. And there was really a general feeling of apathy. No one was really paying too much attention to them. They, in fact, came into the spotlight when the captain was stripped of the captaincy because of the pro-Israeli comments that he made and security concerns around that. Of course, you know that South Africa has taken Israel to the International Court of Justice with a claim of genocide. And that is really how the Under-19 team came to the fore. But they've performed incredibly well. They've been based in Potchefstroom, which is about 100 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg. And it's a student town where the vibe is really excellent. They've had great support. And the find of the tournament, I think, the left-arm seamer, Kwena Mapaka, who has got 18 wickets in the tournament. He looks like such a good prospect for the future. And I guess what South Africans are hoping is that the leagues don't steal all these players from us before they get to play international cricket. So they're looking good. I think they will play India in the semi-finals, and I was covering India down in Bloemfontein. They're looking exceptional, I must say. So I don't know how many will get past India, but it's great that they're in the semi-finals. It's wonderful to see that the pipeline is strong. It's a diverse team, players from all the different provinces, of all the different races. So yeah, I think South African cricket's looking good. I do think the danger is that, of course, there is this great economic concern about leagues, and the leagues kind of loom over us. And I think you guys in New Zealand, to some extent, don't almost know how lucky you are to have a strong currency and to not have to look to a league structure to keep cricket alive. So that's something I'd like to say to the people there. You know, you've got a great thing going for you, and we're doing our best to keep up.
Such interesting insight you've provided for us, Firdose. Thanks for taking the time. We look forward to seeing how this 2-test series plays out over the next couple of weeks or so. Thanks for your time this afternoon. Sure.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to chatting through the series.
We do too. Thanks indeed. Firdose Moonda there, journalist, commentator, broadcaster from South Africa with Cricinfo. Chris says, Jason, your guest commentator, wonderful. So knowledgeable. Yes, she is. She certainly knows her stuff about a team that we don't know a heck of a lot about.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.